tuatahi e mihi ake ki a rātou mā kua whiturangi hia, whakangaro atu ki te pō, ko te tihi, ko te kuia poiria, love, no Tati Awa, i te ata nei e rungo kōrero au kua hinga Trevor Mason, nāna he rangatira rungo nui no te kapa whitupōro o Parapara Umu. Rungo kōrero au kua hinga Francis Larkins, nāna te hoa wahine o Billy Larkins, minita iwi no Rangitāne, e tangata hoki anō e rungo kōrero au i nā pō kua hinga no Ngāti Ruanui no te whānau Davis. Nei reira me tuku ngā mihi aroha ki a rātou te whānau i raru i ngā kapua Pauri, i raru i te whetū o Puhuta Kawa, nei rā te mihi aroha ki a rātou. Te kirimate te whānau e pane ana i tēnei wā, me ki kia piki te ora, ki piki te kaha, ki piki te māramatanga. Aka i a koutou, ko nei rangatira, tai tēnana mai ki tēnei uhuinga, tēnei taku mihi nunui ki a koutou. Aka i a koe, hara, kua tai tēnana mai ki tēnei uhuinga, kōrua tahi ko te rangatira Frank, whakatata mai nei ki taku taha o tēnei huhuinga a nei rāta mihi ki a kōrua. I raru e te āhuatanga o te kaunihera o Kāpiti, hare tonu ngā mihi hoki, kei ngā rangatira o te kaunihera, Janet, kōrua tahi, Martin, tēnei taku mihi nunui ki a koutou. Kei te hunga tiaki o te kaunihera, nā koutou e whakamana tēnei kaupapa, te ana mā, Wātene, Darren, Janice, koutou mā, nei rā te mihi ki a koutou. Nei reira, me tuku ngā whakamoimiti ki te tapu o te rangi me te whenua, te kaihangonga me katoa nāna he whakaarihi ana ngā kaupapa nunui o te rangi nei. Nei reira huri no tēnā koutou, tēnā huhu mai tātou katoa. E te atua tō mātou kaihanga ka ti aho te maramatanga me te ora i a kupu kōrero. Ti matau mahi kia mau te tika me te aroha, me te kia utonu ki a mātou tau aroha i roto i tēnei huhuinga. Whakaki a mātou, whakaaro mātou mahi katoa te wairua tapu. Amen. I just want to acknowledge particularly the whānau love, our kuia Poiria passed away, and it was her tangi yesterday at St. Paul's Church, and I have apologies from Rāko o te ora. He rang me this morning to notify me that Trevor Mason had passed away, who's a very respected and well-known identity in this community. They will be taking his body to Paraparaumu Rugby Club at around 1 o'clock today, where he will be lying. So just want to acknowledge the Mason whānau. Also have heard that Akuia from married into the Te Aweawe whānau, the Larkins whānau, Auntie Francis Larkins have passed away and has been lying at Rangi-Otu Marae. So we extend our aroha to the Te Aweawe whānau, our Rangitāne relations, and a close friend of mine has lost a family member overnight from Ngāti Ruanui, so we extend our greetings and our acknowledgements to the Davis family and to those known and unknown to us that have passed. And we commit our blessings to them and their families at this sad time. And then we return ourselves into the light and the living and to the matters before us today. So I greet you all in your many capacities, from the Mayor and Councillor Halliday. Particularly want to acknowledge Hara Adams this morning, who sitting to my left, and to our Tumu Whakarai, Frank Hippolyte, that I've invited to join us this morning. to our iwi partnership team, to our CE, Darren, Janice, our senior leadership team, and our staff that support our kaupapa. I greet you all and acknowledge you all and welcome you to our meeting. I have apologies from Denise Harpiter and Kirsten Harpiter. I want to just acknowledge Deputy Mayor Lawrence Kirby, who's unwell. And I also have apologies from Te Ora, Te Rako Te Ora, if we could record that, please. So I move that those apologies are received, unless there are any others.
Sorry,
Are there others?
the Deputy Mayor, Lawrence Kirby? Is that on there?
Yes, I included him. Yeah. So I move that those apologies are received. Do we have someone who will second that, please? Worship the Mayor. Very good. All in favour say aye. Contrary carried. Has everyone got a copy of today's agenda? I see Frank perhaps may not. We're just going to note for the moment that Huriwai from Ngāti Toa has indicated he would join us online. Tēnā koe Huriwai. I didn't see you sneaking up behind me. It's typically stealthy behaviour from Ngāti Toa. So acknowledge you being here this morning, Ewa. Thank you for joining us. Public speaking time. I'm not aware of any of our public wanting to address us this morning. Are there any additional agenda items that we should record? I do have one, and it's in relation to representation on the Mahara Gallery Board. There is a transition that our trust has been advised of, and I'd like to just seek some direction through council regarding our iwi representative on that Mahara Gallery Board, and I want to just, I guess, provide some context to that. So can I please ask that we add that, and I'll seek direction from the meeting regarding when we should address that. All right, I'm getting a steer from Steffi that perhaps I raise that here. You may or may not know that Queenie Rikihana Highland has been attached to the Mahara Gallery Board for some time now, and we have supported at the appropriate time a transition, and really initially now in support of Queenie, recognising her service to our iwi and to the district. And so we at Atiawa ki Whakarongotai are supporting Anne-Marie Ellison to establish a working relationship with the Mahara Gallery Board. Can I just reference that the name Mahara connects us back to Parihaka? And so I just want to give that context that the name was given by Tatiawa. What I've learned from our meeting this week with our board is that this position is a voluntary position. I'd like to ask for advice and direction from council regarding our future iwi representatives receiving some form of remuneration to occupy that position. And that's really all I've been asked to bring to the attention of council, but I wanted to bring that first to the table of Te Whakaminenga to respectfully alert ngā hapu and Ngāti Toa of our intention to continue supporting Mahara, and we will work through that transition with Queenie Rikihana Highland and Anne-Marie Ellison. Are there any questions or advice?
Yeah, having been on the Mahara Gallery Trust Board for a number of years with Queenie, she was just such a dynamic and incredible presence around the gallery, with everything that happened there, and was part of the group that worked for so long to try to get that rebuild of the gallery underway, which is about to come to fruition. So a wonderful time as the gallery transitions in general to necessarily to a larger and different operating model, that we have this transition happening at the same time. So I'd like to extend from council our huge thanks to Queenie for the work that she put in over so many years, and to her dedication to the gallery. And I think there's an excellent suggestion in Anne-Marie as a to work alongside initially Queenie, and particularly because she understands that wider space in which the gallery sits, having been a part of the cultural advisory group for the wider town centre development around Mahara Place. So she would have a lot of knowledge of the area and of some of the cultural significance around that space. So yeah, really support this today.
Can I just respectfully say this to our hui in confidence? This is also recognising our whananga Queenie transitioning through a period in her life where it is appropriate and it is respectful for us to acknowledge the work that she has done, as the Mayor has outlined. But we're wanting to protect her, and we're wanting to ensure that we initiate a succession plan that is respectful of her commitment, her time, her energy, and the position that she's reached in her life at this present moment. And we do that respectfully by supporting Anne-Marie into this position. And we'll then want to rely on our relationship with council to talk about how we then affect those little nuances that will need to reflect the commitment of volunteer time that this wahine has given to Mahara, and of course to the benefit of the district. Item 5 on page 6 are the minutes from the previous meeting of Te Whakaminenga or Kāpiti. We'll move the unconfirmed minutes received, and I would like to invite a response regarding any matters arising from the minutes of the 20th of June. Any matters arising or corrections? Can I take it that the minutes are received as read? There are no matters arising from the minutes? Could I have someone move that we adopt the minutes of the previous? Thank you, Councillor Halliday. Seconder. Tēnā koe, Kim. All in favour say aye. Contrary? Carried. Good point. Page 13. There's no reports. Page 13, item 6, reports. There are no reports to be received for today's meeting. Item 7, ngā take e mahi ana, matters under action. Ngā take tarewa. Page 15 is the updated ngā take tarewa. I would invite input from our mana whenua representatives regarding our ngā take tarewa. Just to note, I think we need to correct Hara's name, number 3, item 3. It's incorrect. And I'd like to report to the meeting that there's clearly an expectation that we now need to schedule some time to activate the review of our partnership. And I think there was always an expectation that upon the appointment of our kaihautu hononga aiwi, that we would activate that. So can I just ask that staff note that, and I'll seek direction through you, Hara, and council about how we might want to approach that. We'll need to schedule some time, I think, outside of the Whakaminenga for that engagement. And welcome any other comments from mana whenua representatives regarding item 3. Kim?
Kia ora. No real comments, just to say that we have been discussing this outside of this forum, and it's basically we just need to have a refresh of what that memorandum says, and taking into account Hara's new role and taking into account the direction we want to go. And I think it will probably incorporate discussing things like representatives and how they sit, so it will be an all-encompassing review. Because they're all linked in, even so far as discussing the impacts of the Māori ward. So it won't just be just noting it won't just be the memorandum of partnership. It'll be linked to all the other things. Yeah.
Huriwai, do you have anything to add?
Not really much to add onto that particular item. Just firstly, welcoming you, Hara, into your new role. Looking forward to actually seeing, now that we've got that, I think, critical piece of architecture in place and having a dedicated resource, especially in our area for Te Whakaminenga, I think it'd be quite timely to put this matter of the review as a priority item. I'd be quite keen to sort of see, when we space that on this current term, what are the objectives and milestones that we're looking to hit, just so that we have something to track against and for accountability.
Tēnā koe Huriwai. Item 4.
Sorry, I had something to say about item 3. Just in terms of progressing Huriwai's comment, do you think it might be good, rather than it sitting under this item, for us to have an initial report by the next meeting or the meeting after, so that we can really start to put it properly on the table, maybe with some options about how we want to proceed, or just to lift it out of this table and into its own separate work stream, because it is significant and something that we're deeply committed to from our governance side. Certainly we see so many opportunities to progress this piece of work.
Tēnā koe, Sophie. Welcome. Pleased to have you with us. Thank you, Mayor Janet. Look, yes, I think it deserves a response from council to help provide some advice and direction on how we need to approach this. It would be helpful if we could get some direction from council in terms of your expectations. And I think that it should be a real-time conversation that we're having that shouldn't rely on us needing to wait until our next hui. I'd like to think that I see the words written down here, priority. I think we should rely on our staff of council to help provide the direction that we're seeking, to identify how we would approach our agreed position to review our memorandum of partnership. And I'd like to think that we would be willing and prepared to commit time to this as soon as possible.
Kia ora. Tēnā koutou. I think there's a real opportunity for here for us now that Hara has joined the team to actually prioritise this piece of work and to run some concurrent work streams, noting that we will need to bring updates to Te Whakaminenga or Kāpiti to advise how we are travelling in that piece of work, whilst we do wānanga around what the review of the current memorandum of partnership looks like. So there is some real opportunity here for us to be agile in our approach, noting that there will be, I guess, conflicting or competing work streams for your time, which we are cognizant of, and we have to be able to really manage that so that this piece of work does progress as a priority for our committee. So fully committed now that Hara is in play, and we can start to work something up and bring that to you as a matter of priority.
Kia ora no. Just thinking about the conversation, would it be helpful to make this thing actionable if do we put a recommendation on the table for our iwi partnerships to go away and develop a program of how that's going to work so it actually gets some action behind it? Or how do we work that in? Is it for a recommendation? Is it through just an action?
Yeah, I welcome a recommendation. I think it'd be helpful to put that on the books. It means we've given ourselves some direction to activate this, to get things moving. So could I ask you to move that, please, Kim? And I'll call for a seconder.
So help me write the recommendation. So I recommend that our iwi partnerships team develop an engagement plan or program to progress the review of the memorandum of partnership. And I'm not sure if we need to put this in the recommendation, but that would be really good to see that before the next Te Whakaminenga meeting, so that we can meet separately outside of the Te Whakaminenga and actually see what that looks like, so that when we come to the table, we can say we're happy with that program, and then let's go forward from that.
We'll get some words up on the screen.
Yeah.
I think we need to respectfully acknowledge the intent. We'll get the right kupu in place. Do I have a seconder?
Can I just make a comment, please, Mr. Chair?
Can I just ask,
yes.
Can I get a seconder on it, and then we can discuss the motion?
Have a second.
Thank you, Huriwai. Now thank you.
Okay. Just from a clarity perspective, Hurewai talked about maybe incorporating this into the overall review with regards to relationships. I'm sort of thinking whether this piece of work needs to be a priority with regards to that piece of work, but it does all need to be tied in together. Does that need to be included or as part of this recommendation, or it's a recommendation we're quite happy to be focusing on the memorandum of understanding with Te Whakaminenga or Kāpiti as such? Just putting it out there with regards to process.
I think from my perspective, the review of the Memorandum of Partnership isn't just the document, it's a review of our partnership in full.
And perhaps just to add some context from my perspective, Council undertook their own review. Atiawa ki Whakarongotai conducted an independent review, and I think those outcomes of those reviews need to be factored into the overall view of our new and developing and growing partnership between mana whenua and this council. So I guess it's referencing those tools that are going to inherently help to progress the new relationship that is already developing. Whether it's and I guess the other matter of importance, I guess from a tatiawa perspective, was always the intention that we would respectfully want to be able to sit alongside elected members of the district who are the governors of our district, of Arohe. And from our perspective was always to initiate that partnership change by having the governance, the rangatira of our iwi sitting at the table. Now that's making the differentiation between the operational relationship between our iwi and the council. So that was the position that Tatiawa took as a starting point. So our engagement in the Memorandum of Partnership review should and will include both governance and operational. The motion reads that Te Whakaminenga o Kāpiti request the iwi partnership team develop an engagement plan or program to progress the review of the Memorandum of Partnership. Can we provide further qualification around the term or program? Because it's just saying one or the other, and I think we need to be more definitive about what it is that we're actually telling ourselves we're going to be doing. Kōrero mai, Hurewai.
Oh, good. So just two, I guess, matters to clarify within that recommendation. The first one is I just want to be crystal clear around what are we all thinking when we look at those terms, engagement plan or program. It's more that word engagement is my first one. And the second one is, can we add to the recommendation a time frame for us for it to come back to us? I just don't want I think it's looking at it, trying to elevate the conversation above, whilst the Ngā Take Taru was a very useful part to kind of record the ongoing conversations and actions. I think it'd be, now that we've got sort of that internal structure happening, it would be quite useful to actually start to, I think, pull this together so that we have a cohesive work program. But I mean, so I think for this part, my first question is about what are we all thinking of when we look at their term engagement plan, just so that the team can go away and be like, oh, these are the exact things of what the committee is looking for. And the second one is, can we add in a time frame for it to come back to us?
Ka pai, Hurewai. I think it's also reviewing the terms of reference for the partnership, memorandum of partnership that we have with council. So we actually have a document with some words on a piece of paper. So, you know, what are the terms of reference that bring us into this, lead us into this partnership with our district council? If that's what this recommendation is saying, we'll kei te pai te rā.
Kia ora. Yeah, from my perspective, the engagement plan and program is around how we're going to roll out this engagement, how the iwi partnership team and council are going to roll out this engagement, and what are the steps we're going to take to go through that. In terms of timeline, yeah, I'm all for timelines. However, given Hara's new to the role, she's got a whole lot on her plate. So I'd like her to have the opportunity to assess where this fits in. They know it's a priority. So it may be that we have that initial discussion with the team, and then we can see where that fits to start setting any timelines to it. Obviously, sooner rather than later, but, you know, we have to take into account all the other work that you've got to get through. That's my only reservation of setting an actual date today, because we don't know that. Yeah.
I'm just mindful that we're heading into the spring for our next meeting. The 12th of September is our next meeting. I guess this, for me, raises expectations in terms of how far can we progress this conversation. What expectations are we creating for ourselves as mana whenua and council when we come back to this table on the 12th of September. So perhaps, Hara, we can rely on you and our staff, Diana, Waitene, to take into account the importance of us timelining this work. Art will meet as we do at least fortnightly on the Friday. There's a need to continue having that discussion with each other. So that will be an opportunity, I guess, for staff to know that there's there's timeframes that we are trying to commit to have our own external conversations, and perhaps the timeline might be respectful of that and can take that into account in relation to further updates from the meeting today. Is the meeting comfortable with the recommendation as it reads?
So as long as we're clear that the terms of reference are for the memorandum of partnership, do you think that's clear? Because at the moment it just is. It's fine. I think we all know what we mean, don't we?
We're starting to write a short story. I wonder whether we should delete the second partnership, the kupu partnership. Just should read in full. You comfortable with that, Kim? Huriwai?
For me, that actually changes it. It narrows the scope. Not to be pedantic. Yeah, partnership in full is a broader scope than memorandum of partnership in full, because that means we're reviewing just the memorandum of partnership in full, and the intent is to review the actual partnership.
Is it?
Okay.
Yeah. Is it? Because my thinking, and it's good that we're having this debate, is that the council has undertaken their own review. There has been an independent review that has created the changes that have already been implemented, that was adopted as of July last year. So if we bear that in mind, which is the reason why I was sitting at the council tables, does that motion capture the intent?
So I suppose there's two things. If we go with that motion, I'm okay with it, but from that review, other things might drop out of it. So that's fine. But then we actually can focus, because the partnership and full review is a bigger piece of work. So if we focus on that, if we're saying we focus on that as a starter, what drops out of that may go into a fuller review. But then, because our intention was actually to review the memorandum of partnership, wasn't it? Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
So I'm happy with that.
Huriwa, are you comfortable where we've landed?
Yep.
All right. Well, there's no further discussion. I'll put the motion. All in favour say aye. Contrary? Carried. Kia ora. Item 4, nomination of mana whenua representatives. Is there any update on this? Have we made any further progress regarding those vacancies? And if we haven't, can we please address that?
We haven't, but we've already got, Ngāhapu's already got a representative on the audit and risk. So happy for Te Atiawa and Toa to look at the community grants, because I believe it's one mana whenua rep from all three. But if you can't progress that, let us know. Just in the spirit of getting someone in there.
Ngāti Toa and Te Atiawa will have conversations. Huriwai, we just give that indication to the meeting today. And obviously, Te Atiawa has fairly recently transitioned through an annual general meeting. As noted, Chris Gerritsen has retired. I would like us to acknowledge his service to Te Whakaminenga and his service to the Committee on Council. So perhaps we might draft a letter of appreciation for his service. And understandably, Te Atiawa ki Wakarongotai will review our mana whenua representation as a result of Chris's retirement. TFR.
I'm happy to co-sign that letter if it's appropriate. I'd just like to point out that the grants, both of the grants committees are still without iwi representation, and having chaired those committees, I'd like to encourage that to be progressed if possible, because they're relatively small amounts of money, but quite significant to the community service organisations and individuals who apply, and particularly it's good to have that input into the Creative Communities scheme.
Thank you, Janet. Noted. And this will be updated on our Ngā Take Tarewa. Thank you. Establishment of the Māori Ward. I just want to recognise that at Council last week, a paper came up before elected members. I'm encouraging just an update for the purposes of the three iwi coming together today on where that landed. It has been obviously indicated to the Council the position that Atiawa ki Wakarongotai had taken, but I encourage further discussion on this matter, and I'll defer to our elected members to provide an update on where that landed at Council's meeting last week.
It was the week before. So we left that matter to lie on the table until the 10th of August meeting. As we didn't feel like we'd had sufficient input from mana whenua. And I have to apologise. I was intending to email. I did get in touch with a couple of people, but I was intending to send out a general email asking for that feedback, which I'm about to send. So it would be good to get some kind of guidance at the meeting today if possible. Otherwise, if the people who I sent that email to could please respond with some kind of guidance about how iwi are feeling about the establishment of a Māori ward. One thing I will say is that it will ensure that it doesn't impact on the previous resolution that we've made in terms of reviewing the Memorandum of Partnership. All existing work programs and representation arrangements would remain in place, no matter what that decision is. It would mean that the council would go out for a general representation review, which is required to get some feedback from the community on the establishment of a Māori ward, but the decision is down to council. So, yeah, we'll see how that goes on the 10th of August, but we would really appreciate some guidance in the meantime.
Any comments from our mana whenua representatives, Kim?
I'm just trying to remember what we discussed. Basically, in our head, we wanted the time to actually get our heads around how that would impact, to get down the actual details. And I believe the reason we delayed it was because there was some time, because we were told there was a time in, was it August or even later, that this decision had to be made, so it wasn't a priority at the time. Understanding that it's got to go to council and the decision needs to be made, and then from that triggers a representation review and the timing of that and how that all folds into when that rolls out. So just saying yes, let's do it, or let's not do it, it's not the end of the story. So I think we wanted to get our heads around that. I'm not sure that we actually have. So that might be something that we need to sit down outside this forum and actually really. We've had a presentation on the Māori ward here already, so it's not. I don't think we need another presentation, but we just need to get our heads around, because as it stands now, the biggest risk is a Māori ward does not have to be mana whenua. So that's a risk. And I believe it's based on population, as to where the Māori wards are. And so that's kind of the biggest risk. So the fact that it would be out of our control and potentially it could be a vote against mana whenua, because we have these situations all the time out of council and we have these arguments all the time. That's the risk. So that's the main risk of actually saying yes to a Māori ward. And as it wasn't seen as a priority, I don't think we were in any rush from Ngāhapu's perspective to look at it, understanding now that actually council needs to make some decisions on it. So maybe we need to move that up the priority list for ourselves to get some understanding of it. But that was the main risk, that actually Māori ward is not definite that would be a mana whenua rep, and then so which puts our memorandum of partnership, makes that very, very important if we were to then have a Māori ward, because if we're set on the memorandum of partnership and we can ensure that we can work through that and we've got that relationship through the memorandum of partnership, then the Māori ward might not be such a high risk. But as we haven't had the review, there is that risk. So it's so apologies. Yes, it has intentionally gone on the back burner, but understanding now that there is a time limit that we need to kind of work to.
Yeah, so just to clarify, the decision is whether to go out and consult through a representation review on whether to establish a Māori ward. No? Oh, the decision is to go out, maybe I'll let staff, just to be clear on the process. It's to go out to consult on whether to do a representation review.
So the decision that council will make on the 10th of August is not whether or not to establish the Māori ward, but whether or not to commence community consultation and then get the community's view on what they think, whether they are in favour of establishing a Māori ward. And then a paper will be brought back to council to outline the community's view. And before the 23rd of November, they will have to make a decision on whether or not to establish a Māori ward in order for it to kick in for the next election. So if a decision is made after that, a Māori ward can still be established, but it would mean it wouldn't be in place for the next election. So that's the time frames that we're looking at.
Just to add some further clarification, but Steffi, please jump in if I'm lost in the details a bit. As it currently stands, there is no requirement for the council to consult the community. There is legislation that will likely take effect later in the triennium that would apply for the next round of representation reviews and consideration of Māori wards that would require more extensive consultation than this council has undertaken in the past. So the decision to be put before council in August on whether or not to consult the community there is a genuine consideration there for council. It is not something that they are specifically required to do at this point. Just to pick up on the Mayor's comments around a representation review, should the council resolve at some point later this year by the deadline of, I think which Steffi gave, to establish a Māori ward, that would then trigger a representation review to look at the best way to establish that Māori ward within the overall representation structures that are in place.
Sorry, I did miss a step. So, but each decision is quite key, because when we make our decision that's coming up, once we make that decision to go out to consult, we're communicating that that's something that we are interested, that's a process that we're interested in going down. If we decide not to, we're just deciding that we want our entire focus to be on our review of the iwi partnership and all that kind of entails. So to me, this first decision is quite key, because we can make that decision at that point. We've got a lot on our plate. We need to do a partnership review. We've got this work program underway, or we're interested in consulting with the community on whether we want to add to that and have another kind of strand to our Māori representation at the council table. So I think it is quite important to get some guidance on this first stage, because once that decision's made, then we're kind of going down a path, you know. So I know that we still have another decision to make on whether to then go out and do that representation review later on. But this is still a key step. I think that's what I was kind of trying to communicate before. So, I mean, there's still time if for iwi to have that conversation and provide that considered feedback before we make that second stage in the decision. But it would be really good to have some guidance at this point. So, yeah, and we need to make that decision on the 10th of August on whether to consult. That can't be put off further, because we wouldn't be able to meet our statutory. If we wanted to have a Māori ward in place by the next election, we'd need to make that decision on the 10th of August. That's as far as we can push it out.
Yeah, probably just to clarify and put in context, I understand that it's just to consult, but once you start to consult, it opens the floodgates and the expectation that next you're going to consult, then you're going to decide, then there's a review, and so it leads you in that direction that actually a Māori ward is going to be established. So that's the risk. And then just to put it into context, so the way iwi normally, well, I'll speak from Hapa o Taki, the way we work is that through manaakitanga, we take on consideration not just our hapu and our iwi, but Māori and our rohe. So we do that naturally through our own systems. And this is a system outside of that for council, which I completely understand and I'm not against. But just if we were to say, yes, let's consult, and we haven't got our memorandum of partnership. So if there was a space to say consult after we've consolidated our memorandum of partnership or something along those lines, that could be an option. I'm not saying it is, but the fear is and the risk is that it opens that floodgate in a one-way direction, and there's no dialing that back. Once it's out there, and the expectation that it builds could be something that we end up not wanting. And we don't know that yet until we're actually fully engaged in this memorandum of partnership. And I know that doesn't really help, but yeah, that's the risk, and that's what we're thinking about. That's all. And from our perspective, we already take care of, say, mātā waka and the rest. So yeah.
Huriwai, do you have anything to add?
No, I think it would just be useful probably if we have just for the Art Confederate iwi representative just to have a quick chat offline. After this part is after this particular meeting is concluded, just so we can kind of get on board again as to kind of where this is all heading. For myself, I think that whilst I can see Ngā Hapu o Taki's perspective around, when you signal something, there's some sort of implied or intended action that takes that further step. I think at my end at the moment, I agree with what has been raised before about the likely direction of travel that Art Confederation iwi will likely put up in terms of whether or not a Māori ward should be established. I do have a question though, and it's probably more for Steffi. I just want to clarify, in this particular process that we're going down, noting that it is a statutory time frame that we have to complete in order, so that's why we're just working our way back from that point to make decisions. I just want to clarify, if the council chooses not to establish a Māori ward for the next triennium, does that question come up every term, like for the following triennium?
So yes, next triennium it would come up again because of the bill that's currently travelling through Parliament. So I can't answer whether it would come up every single triennium, but certainly it would come up again next triennium, and there would be a statutory requirement for council to consider it again if they had not established a Māori ward for the 2025 election. That's currently what the bill requires. Does that sort of answer the question?
No, it does. Thank you.
Kia ora tātou. If I can share an observation of an experience, and it is nothing more than an observation. I have been witness to discussions in relation to establishment of Māori wards where council has gone out to consult and there has been a strong will which has not been the desire of the council of the day to implement that will, which has seen a change in the process as to how that consultation was undertaken, and a move which saw a direction change, which saw the establishment of Māori wards at the end of the day, which was the will of iwi in that particular district. And so the observation that I would share with you today is sometimes haste is not the best approach, noting that there are several pieces of very important work that we as council officers are being asked to progress, noting that the review of our memorandum of partnership is something that we undertake every triennium, and the commitment that I have made is to progress that as a priority for council, and now that Hara is in her new role, that is a commitment that I intend to hold staff to ensure that we give credibility to this committee and to the partnership that council has with Te Whakaminenga or Kāpiti. At the same time, we have to be guided by the decisions of our council, which at times can be conflicted. And so I make my comments purely as an observation, and I'll say again that sometimes in haste we don't necessarily have the best result for not just our district but for everyone who may be affected. I'll just share that with you.
I'd like to just take us back to earlier conversations we've had, not just through Te Whakaminenga or Kāpiti, but also through council. The term Māori, for a start, creates discomfort for me, because again, in my view, it's just a comfortable, convenient colonial term. We're about to prepare for 184 years of collective support and agreement as a confederation of mana whenua partners. And we've continued to maintain our role and responsibility to uphold our tino rangatiratanga as kaitaki. And what that requires is our acknowledgement of those that occupied the various rohe of Ngāti Toa, Tatiawa and Ngāti Raukawa. And we've done that successfully. And so I find it difficult again to have respect for, be I say it, Pākehā construct, and conveniently we use the term Māori, when in our language, Māori refers to an indigenous grouping of people. And so we have, as you have rightfully said, Kim, upheld our responsibility now for almost 200 years as kaitaki across this region. I do also want to just remind ourselves today that on the 6th of June, we gave an indication to the Mayor and the CE of our principal position as mana whenua to oppose the establishment of a Māori ward. And that was so that we could continue to develop our partnership with this council for this triennium. That's the distraction that we would prefer to commit our time and energy and resource to. It does link into our discussion earlier about reviewing our partnership, reaching an agreement on the memorandum of partnership that formally activates our role with each other, both at a governance and an operational level. So I welcome further discussion and further debate regarding where this should land. I think I can recall conversations about other models that currently exist around the country. Some are not so flash. Some haven't actually delivered on expectations that the community at large had. And I think that today's meeting should consider informing us all about those other districts that have also confronted this discussion or question around Māori ward, and what does it look like for them? What benefits have been gained by mana whenua, continuing to hold on to their responsibility as kaitaki, to express their tino rangatiratanga unconditionally, without any compromise. So I welcome further discussion and debate, but I'm also respectful of timelines that have been identified by our staff today. And perhaps the last comment I would make is that at the council meeting that I didn't attend 2 Thursdays ago, I think I'm right, there were 2 recommendations that sat before council. What I would really like to encourage is a more efficient communication link between our council and mana whenua when there are items that are on the agenda, where there are recommendations that have a direct impact on mana whenua, for that to be communicated to our mana whenua representatives. It's not a criticism, it's just a request. I've had that discussion this morning with the Mayor and with Hara. How can we create more efficiency so that if those recommendations, as an example for the Māori ward, were deferred, how can we communicate that immediately to the mana whenua representatives at this table, so that we can initiate our response to that? So I request us to work together to establish that efficiency, and I appreciate that this has been raised with Hara this morning. Any other matters regarding this take? Kapai.
Just before we move on, to note that I've now sent out an email, so if I could have some responses via email for the meeting, if possible, that would be really appreciated. I've also sent a link to the council agenda with the report for further information.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And can that be referenced in the update of our Ngā Take Tarewa, please? Item 7, maramataka. I know that certainly from some of my takapuahia relations, they're screaming out for maramataka. They're all jealous if they don't get one. So I suspect that the maramataka has been a very successful initiative again, and I just want to respectfully acknowledge all the work that was undertaken by our staff and by those contributors to the maramataka, and also acknowledging our Art Rongoa Collective for helping to bring that all together. I understand the celebration was well attended and was well reflected in some of the responses I've had, the photos that I've seen. So yeah, I just want to acknowledge the excellent effort made by all involved to bring this to fruition. Are there any comments or responses regarding our maramataka?
Just to talk all those comments, really. The launch event was just absolutely fabulous, and I know I shouldn't really single out people, but I'd like to single out Deanna in this case, because the determination to get the thing over the line, and the just the energy and the specialness of that event was just really, really wonderful. So thank you, and the Rongoa Collective as well. I think the publication itself is just, it's lifted to another level this year. It's got so much depth of information and opportunities for learning about that whole kaupapa. That's just, so pick it up at the service desk or at local libraries.
Yeah, just tautoko that and all the work that goes on behind the scenes before the day, because it takes a lot to get it there and to coordinate everyone and everything to land on the same day. So well done team. They're so good that we're going to be asking for another 50 if we could. So I'll probably sort that out with the team later. But yeah, it's beautiful.
Thank you. And yeah, again, acknowledgement to all of those that work so diligently to bring this into our new year. I just would like to perhaps note that we think it might be helpful if our IP team meet with our Paurongoa for a post-launch review. So could we perhaps just reference that?
Deanna's organised a hui for tomorrow morning for that, so we'll do that. Hey?
So could we schedule that meeting for tomorrow, please? Yeah, that'd be great. Look, and another thing I'd like to just mention is the importance of actually just not simply pinning our maramataka on the wall and congratulating ourselves for a beautiful document that reflects what our lunar calendar and our lunar cycle looks like. Can I ask again respectfully for us to consider how we might allow maramataka to direct our decision making on certain days and certain times? I've raised this before. There are times when we will have significant matters at hand to address, and if we're meeting on a day that isn't complementary to that, then we know that that will create difficulty for us. So I'm really asking us to consider how we might make a new approach to actually activating our reliance and our respect for our maramataka. And that means becoming familiar with days when you're simply not going to be able to get that big take over the line. It's not smart, it's not correct, it's not appropriate, simply because of the cycle, I'll put it that way, that we are confronted with. So again, I'll ask that we perhaps reflect on that in terms of setting dates and times to meet, and considering particular kaupapa, particular matters of significance or importance, because each individual day has its own ability to influence our lives, our decision making, our well-being, our engagement, our relationships. So perhaps if we could just somehow capture that in our ngā take tarewa and our approach to the mahi that we undertake. Item 8, this has been sitting for a bit now, and I've got a personal note to myself that heritage funding, there was a need for us to progress this as well, and Hada's timely appointment, I think, should signal the intention to have an external conversation with one another about this, Janice. Be happy to seek advice through our IP team in terms of discussions to scope and look at how we resource this. It also brings to mind, as has been recorded, Pākā Kutu and Nangiuru, look, there are significant sites that are referenced in many of the reports and many of the discussions that come before council. And I think it might be helpful for us all to schedule a half day or a day to go from the south or the north and the south and put our feet on the whenua, put our eyes on significant sites, have a conversation that takes the words off the paper into that atmosphere out there that we all are attached to, so we can personally appreciate what it is that those words are referencing. And if I use, for example, Wainui Whenua, what does that mean? To some of us, it means a whole lot of things. It means take raupatu to some of us. For some of us, it means Auntie Jean Budge's house. Wouldn't it be helpful, perhaps, if we could commit our time and energy, and I'd like to seek permission from today's meeting to direct us back through our staff, to look at doing a site visit across the rohe, where we could actually go and identify these sites of significance, areas of interest, traditional and historic places of interest and significance. We tie in the historical connection, we tie in the operational conversations that are being applied through interaction with council and council staff, managers, and we might arrive at our tuahu in Otaki at Rangiatea and decide to finally put a plaque on that plinth that's been standing there since we opened the church. I'll use that as an example where we could actually activate a plan, a schedule, to review a number of things that brought to our attention in our various capacities, and really just to familiarise ourselves and to create that whakawhanaungatanga with one another. So I'd like that to be referenced today, please, and I'd like that to be included as part of our overall reporting back to each other, to ourselves, through Te Whakaminenga, more importantly, ngā take tarewa. Any other matters under item 8? Item 9, Matariki. I think probably from my perspective, I'm satisfied that other than the excellent job done to create our maramataka, that there were various hautapu that were observed across the rohe of Ngāti Toa, Tatiawa and Ngāti Raukawa. And I wonder whether we need to do some due diligence, and perhaps this could be directed through, again, through our Kaihautu Hononga Iwi, Group Manager, regarding the opportunities that we need to look at in terms of LTP funding to support iwi-led Matariki kaupapa. And I just also want to just highlight again that the traditional production of the maramataka should continue, but respectfully, again, each iwi were invited each year, on each cycle, to consider how they would like to construct that maramataka. So it wasn't always a rongoa focused or rongoa based maramataka. And so I think we have an expectation that across the three iwi, we look to those individual iwi each cycle to consider how they would like to construct that maramataka. But obviously the Rongoa Collective from Art had captured an audience, have captured a particular theme, and I think there's a need to respectfully have that separation so that it doesn't at all compromise the tradition that we have over time of each individual iwi being invited each time on their cycle to consider how they would like to construct their maramataka. And again, it also raised the question this year about the protection of intellectual and cultural property rights. And those of you that are familiar with the history of this council supporting the publication of the maramataka will know many, many images, photos, kōrero tāhu who have been included. And I don't know that in the past we have consciously thought about the protection of that intellectual and cultural property. I'm happy that we addressed that this year, and it needs to be something that we maintain a commitment to protect. Any other comments regarding Matariki? Kei te pai, me haere tātou. Item 10, Waitangi Day 30 years of partnership. Again, Hara, I can see your name going up in lights. And then another note here also just to progress this conversation, external to our meeting today. What I would like us to do, please, is separate out the reference in this particular item to the claims. I think they need to stand alone. And so at our meeting last Friday, it was agreed that, what's happening with our takutai mona applications, Tatiawa actually at the moment, heavily involved in the High Court's proceedings regarding kārerewerewa. This week, our people are attached to Hearing Week 13, being hosted by two kōrehe. Overnight, I've generated the updated timetable. There is the online link that I've sent through to staff. So I'd like to ask that we add a new item, and we reference that as claims. So that will create number 22, if I'm correct. We separate that out because I see that as a completely separate take to Waitangi Day, and give an indication that there were some further conversations that we need to initiate in relation to the 30 years of partnership with this local authority. So happy to invite any further comments or conversation regarding this take. Huriwai, got your hand up? Kōrero mai.
Kia ora. Just looking at that and trying to tie in a few strings in my head, I think firstly it would be, I don't know, seeking everyone else's opinion, but I think it may be useful to have that reference point of Waitangi, perhaps to sort of tie up this review of the Memorandum of Partnership. I think if we can, come to hopefully a positive conclusion as to what the review has meant and then what we all agree to as forward steps, we could perhaps use that point to celebrate. And then also the other string I've got in my head is whether or not we could pull together some collateral and have that as our submission for the next year's local government awards as part of iwi and local government collaboration. Just putting that one out there. No, that's me.
Kia ora, Huriwai. Thank you. Any other advice or comments, responses?
I do actually. Yeah, I'll start with Andre's comments. I agree that organising an event potentially for Waitangi Day is a very different issue than the hearings that are coming up around Waitangi claims. They're even in the same paragraph in the report, which is slightly confusing. There's a list of places that the Te Tiriti o Waitangi was signed, and then there's a list of hearing dates, which are slightly convoluted. So, yeah, I think that's really important to separate that out, particularly as the Waitangi tribunal processes kind of speed up and become more complex. I think that needs to be definitely separated out. It's also quite different work streams in terms of the resourcing that's going to be required. If we decided we wanted to hold Waitangi Day events, particularly multiple events, as is suggested in the report, then I wouldn't expect Hara to be an event organiser. That's a full-time role in itself. So there are other resources we'd need to pull in across council to support that kaupapa, and we certainly have some of those resources across other teams. So really important in terms of resourcing as well to separate those out. Yeah, I'll leave it there for now, actually.
Just quickly, I think it's a really important milestone, and as I have relationships with other councils, a lot of our whanaunga, well, some of our whanaunga don't have this relationship, so we have quite a blessed relationship here. Not saying that can't be improved, but you know, the things that we have set down here, a lot of people have worked really hard to get to where we are now, and other of our whanaunga in other areas aren't so lucky to have that relationship and haven't gone that forward. So I do agree it's completely separate, but it's a really important event, and it would be great, you know, to actually remember and acknowledge everything that's gone on before us to get us here. That's all.
Yeah, perhaps some videos of some sort, especially from those who were there at the beginnings. You know, on both sides would be quite useful.
Oh, look, and just through the chair, I just want to acknowledge the fact that that date's fast approaching, so that we don't really want this to sit too much on the back burner. It needs to be sort of almost a little bit of front and centre. We're only about 5 months away.
Thank you for the responses. Thank you for your advice. Item 11 makes reference to the engagement we've had previously with Carl Farrell, and I have just indicated earlier that we have an interest in supporting Carl, but we also absolutely want to recognise Ngāti Haumia. The report that came to council Thursday past, what I've noted is that the report did not specifically reference the Budge family property. So I want to just ensure that we're reporting to ourselves through this mechanism regarding all matters that relate to Wainui Whenua, and that whare of that kuia is connected to the overall land interest that we have been discussing. And I fully appreciate that there is a particular group that are focused entirely on the whare, and I do want to recognise the excellent work that our council officers have undertaken. I recognise the Mayor and Sophie that attended a meeting that was convened by the former Mayor Jenny Rowan to help progress a work plan with some very encouraging developments regarding the protection of that papakainga and ultimately the retention of it. But the overall conversation from an iwi perspective is ensuring that Ngāti Toa who have been active in this space from the very beginning, goes back to the pre-settlement stuff, together with our regional authority and with KCDC, respectfully need to be acknowledged, but so does Ngāti Haumia. And although this for one family is around one whare, the overall aspirations of Ngāti Haumia is to be able to develop a papakainga development, and in the future at some time to establish their own marae. And I feel excited to know that those are some of their personal aspirations, and from a tatiawa whakarongotai perspective, we absolutely want to be respectful of that. And the fact that this requires our interest and our involvement and our support through our engagement with our local authority, through our engagement with the regional authority, and across the Confederation of Art. So just want to acknowledge through the Mayor and our senior staff the excellent work that has been undertaken at this point. I'm very impressed. It has brought together the two councils, and I'm satisfied that Carl and those that are attached to this particular matter feel very supported and are very grateful for the progress that has been made. So I want to acknowledge that. And in due course, Tatiawa ki Whakarongotai will want to continue engaging directly with Ngāti Haumia so that we're fully briefed on their future aspirations and their moemoea regarding this particular take. And we have purposely, as I've reported before, activated our operational arm through our Taiao unit, so that we're aware of some of the challenges that will be faced in terms of the status of the land and the legislative matters that may complicate things, may need to be traversed.
Yeah, thank you. I wonder if this is another instance of two issues which are they cross over, but they're two separate issues. So at the last meeting, I heard Carl say quite clearly that the Wainui Whenua land, from his point of view, wouldn't be an ideal site for the Budge House. So moving the Budge House to an appropriate site for Ngāti Haumia is kind of one project, which may or may not, and the wider papakainga which might surround that, may or may not then exist in the nearby Wainui Whenua land. But the Wainui Whenua has broader kind of issues and a broader kind of consideration that's needed, including environmental considerations and the wider Ngāti Toa interest in the land, which stretches right over almost to Battle Hill, and has been quite a separate work program to the moving of the Budge House, which is another thing which is also important and which is going really well. Those discussions are going really well. Bringing the Department of Conservation back into the fold would be a good thing. That's one kind of downside of what's been happening, but certainly Greater Wellington Regional Council taking that very seriously, and a possible solution kind of nearly underway, it looks like. So our staff well and truly involved in that too, including our property team. So I wonder if they need to be separated out in this report. In terms of that direct relationship with Ngāti Haumia, I think we leaned on Carol Reihana for a long time to provide us with that, because she sat at this table and was so deeply committed to this forum. And I wonder if we haven't, as an organisation, I know the Paikakarika Community Board have very close relationships with Ngāti Haumia, but as a wider organisation, how we progress that direct relationship, which is entirely appropriate.
I think it's all relative, your Mayor Janet. When we're talking about Wainui Whenua, we're talking about confiscated land. That's what generates the interest. That's what generates, in my opinion, a responsibility to have an interest, albeit that it might involve a house. We're talking about a considerable amount of land that was taken, and our genuine interest is to support all interests of those who have historic and ancestral connections to that whenua. I'm pleased that we were able to redirect Carl to come to Te Whakaminenga, which has meant that there should be a degree of comfort that through this forum it has provided visibility and inclusion of the three iwi in this discussion. Te Awa has initiated direct contact with Ngāti Haumia, so I have taken that upon my own shoulders to seek out those that are responsible for the legal entity of Ngāti Haumia, and I agree with your sentiments, Janet, that it would be really helpful if we could establish a direct line of communication with the hapu, and that has been my personal request through a member of our staff who actually occupies a secretarial role with Ngāti Haumia. So I'm just working away quietly on that so that I'm satisfied that we have got that additional support around Carl and his family, and it so does reflect the long-term relationship that we have all enjoyed with Carol Reihana in her time. So to reinstate that, I think would be helpful, and I've taken the initiative to make contact with those members of Ngāti Haumia that are responsible for the representation of that iwi at a governance level. Yeah. I welcome any further comment or advice. Huriwai or Kim, if you have anything to add on this take.
Not so much in this particular take on number 11, but I was just thinking of number 8, not to go back too far, but in terms of that proposed action that you have for a site visit, I was just wondering how to, whether one of the future upcoming Te Whakaminenga days could be used as that day, because we're already booked out anyways. Maybe use the last one in the calendar year to do a site visit.
Ka pai.
He whakaro pai tērā. I'll look into that. Kia ora.
Item 12, tangata whenua considerations, sections and reports. I'd like to think my reflection is that this is work in progress, and I feel like I'm seeing evidence of responses coming back to council that helps to inform our decision-making process. So, yeah, happy that this is acknowledged as a convenient and helpful form of engagement between mana whenua, our staff that help, write those reports, prepare those papers that come back before council committees and council. So just again encourage ngā hapu and Ngāti Toa and Tatiawa to be responsive to matters that are of importance through those various committees of council and council. Item 13, I think we're just simply going to say, hara, how's it all going? This, of course, is recognising some of the limitations that we do have because of resourcing or lack of resourcing to be able to respond and to be able to react. This, I know, was a part of our discussions through the independent review that Atiawa ki Whakarongotai completed. So perhaps it might be helpful to provide further qualification around that by discussing this further with you, Hara, and referencing how we came to this position. Yeah. Item 14,
sorry.
reserve management. Sorry.
Oh, no, sorry,
What-
sorry, interrupt. I was
what
saying
do
in
you
terms of item 13, can we fold that particular matter of secretariat functions into the, or whatever format, that upcoming engagement plan? If that is the easiest space to sit, I'm just trying to think of a way of how, I think especially once we get up to the point where we've got a sort of set work program, then in terms for council staff or teams wanting to stick up items to us, then they can at least start to align what their matters that they're seeking, feedback on or whatever from Te Whakaminenga, and how they can align that with our principles and our priorities, and whether or not that would come through that secretariat or some other format.
Kia ora, yeah, I agree with Huriwai, that the secretariat folds into that work, but in addition to that, it depends on how long that work takes. So a secretariat is quite immediate, and so if that's going to be a long-term program, then maybe we need to look at something immediate, and not to rush into it. And then I'm actually going through this list, and I'm looking at the amount of jobs clocking up for our iwi partnership team that they have not been involved in before, and so it springs to mind the increased capacity that they are going to need in the interim to deliver this until we figure out what that looks realistically in partnership with Mana Whenua through that memorandum of partnership. So yes, it is folded in, but in the interim we need to, because this is a lot of commitment, and I'm looking at Hara and I'm thinking, oh, poor Hara, she just got here.
But I think that
but
might
yeah.
be useful though, to kind of see that work program as it is, because then that will sort of drive the conversations,
Yeah.
I think, operationally, of course, around capacity and resource.
Item 14, reserve management plan work program. I think again, this links into the current conversations. I feel like it again automatically creates an expectation that our IP team are visible here, active in the space, looking at how we progress iwi engagement in this area of work. Happy to seek further advice or direction through our staff on how we should perhaps incorporate this with other bits of work, so we're not perhaps duplicating it, and see how this could lend itself to us having one conversation instead of three.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk on that. That's what I was going to say, picking up on what you said before, Andre, about how, because when we're in committees and briefings, this comes over our table. So how we can make sure that we're not duplicating, so we're able to make those decisions quickly and efficiently, rather than, sometimes there is items that we need to view separately, and that's fine. But when it's things like this, to make sure that we're just all getting the same message, and we're not seeing this information twice or three times sometimes for some of us.
I think, sorry, just to add on to it, as part of that establishment of that secretariat function, it would have to be something likely where the mana whenua representatives may have to just set aside, blocks of time throughout, each Friday, 9 to 10 or something. Then the secretariat from that point could sort of work with the other teams across KCDC to be like, okay, who needs to actually put in at which dates and times, rather than sort of piecemeal case by case basis that comes across, and then you're just trying to find anything that fits.
Can I just make a comment? Thank you, Chair. Kia ora koutou. From an officer perspective, what I'm seeing is as we discuss the work in action, is probably the amount of work that we get through as a council, a medium-sized council, and the expectations that we have upon our elected members to be over everything that we work through. And I went through, rightly or wrongly, I made some assumptions about being able to add some days to our calendar to increase the tempo. And we've reached agreement, the Mayor and I, as to a way forward there, with the best of intentions, I might add. Our councillors also have a life outside of their civic roles, and I need to remind myself of that regularly. I'm fortunate that this is what I do, and this is where my focus is, and so if I put that lens over our mana whenua representatives, I'm also starting to get a sense that the expectation in the roles and representing mana whenua also is at times at odds with other commitments that you have outside of anything civic. And so understanding how we might best be able to facilitate those requirements and those other commitments is a constant challenge for us, but something that we are more than happy to look at. I take on board the comment that we should be looking to work smarter rather than looking at regurgitating the same thing to different audiences. And coming back to the maramataka discussion and the cycling, how do we look to better understand when, from a spiritual sense, that we might be at our best as far as performance? I don't purport to have an answer there, but I do take note. And a discussion that we had at one of our earlier briefings or workshops with councillors and wider elected members was about trusting your fellow people where you're not able to be present at every briefing or workshop, trusting in those representatives that are around you to be able to bring that information back to the particular committee or group that might not have been there. And the example I use is when I'm not here, I trust my executive team. I trust the chief executive who represents me in my absence to keep the business running, because at the heart of it, we are a business and we deliver for our communities. So it's finding the space and also the mindset to be able to trust in those people around us, so that our work does continue. Again, another observation.
And just to add to that, I think it's helpful, like from my perspective, it would be really helpful because we're in this transition where Māori are been brought in fully to these discussions, and we're always being asked what the Te Ao Māori lens is, what our what our opinions are. For me, it would be helpful when those reports are brought to the table if they've already had a Te Ao Māori lens, and so that's something that I'll raise in the memorandum of understanding, but that either someone from Mana Whenua's experts, iwi experts or Taiao team has already been working closely with that team to bring that report to the table, because that gives me confidence that that's already had a once over. It's really hard to sit at a governance table and only see it for the first time and not know that that's been had. I'm not trying to say that the council staff don't do a great job, because they do work hard and they do trying to get everything right. I'm not saying that at all, but because we're in this transition where it's a new game, I think the staff need that guidance more now. Over the years, I envision that will fade away, because we'll all be on the same waka and all be on the same path. That's the goal, obviously. But just in this transition phase, I think that would give me confidence going to those tables, that it's not just me, because you've got to remember you have a whole council behind you, but we have a whole people that rely on us to get that message through to that one document. And that's bigger than any pay packet pressure that you could ever imagine. So just that one thing, being able to have our experts sit along, and it may be that they sit alongside and say, look, we don't need to be here, you've got it. But just knowing that would really help. Yeah.
Pai ana nā kōrero, me haere tātou. Item 15, e Otaki youth space. I see here it's just noting work in progress. I have had a couple of requests to meet with the kai whakahaere for Te Puna Oranga in Otaki, so I will plan to have a hot chocolate with her. But just to note, the ongoing expectation this creates regarding the ability to duplicate, the ability to implement a similar significant community-based initiative that would benefit the rangatahi o Watiawa ki Whakarongotai, that would benefit those rangatahi o Ngāti Tō Rangatira. So I just don't want us to lose sight of that. It's not urgent, but it's certainly want to express our interest, and I will fully appreciate meeting with Hineti to sort of gain a better perspective and appreciation of what is happening on the ground. I know a couple of the staff in there as well, so I am looking forward to meeting. Tino Rangatiratanga flag, I see it's not hanging yet. I suspect that's because there's more conversations to have. What I did want to reference, and she's not here now, but just what I think might be helpful, perhaps, Steffi, is that the reference point was those rangatahi conveying this to our councillor, to Councillor Sophie. I'd so want to just ensure that we're respectful that that's what initiated their interest, their indication, their question, and so this matter is being noted and recorded by the Art Confederation, and there will be some ongoing conversations regarding our young people asking the question whether it would be appropriate to have a Tino Rangatiratanga flag visible within the chambers of council. Those discussions are ongoing. Item 17, the terms of reference for it's the Kāpiti Housing Steering Group. Yes. There has been some discussion across the Art Confederation. It was noted that we approved the terms of reference on the 20th of June. We've had further conversations. And again, from a Tatiawa perspective, wanted to just note again that we have formally withdrawn from the Wellington Regional Leadership Committee, both at a governance and an operational level. And I would just simply like it noted today that formal notification hasn't as yet been acknowledged. We'll follow that up. I'm a bit disappointed that we haven't even had the courtesy of a reply, and yet I was contacted by an external consultant that was asked to do some work to review that committee and had been handed a copy of our letter, and yet we haven't had the courtesy of a response.
Yeah, so I've been contacted by that same external consultant to provide feedback, and I'll certainly make sure that I mention this. If it's not appropriate to answer, then don't answer. But what was the reason for withdrawing from that group? So that I can feed that into my feedback
Yeah,
to them.
I would say respectfully, probably now 3 years ago, we raised some concerns about the ability of the contracted consultant that was being engaged to provide us a degree of confidence and trust in knowing and understanding how to work with mana whenua. And that was signalled back then. There are a whole lot of matters that we have identified in detail regarding the challenges that we've faced across our operational arm and at a governance level, Janet, that have just simply made it untenable for us to continue to engage with that committee. Now, look, at the end of the day, it doesn't mean that we are excluded from being involved in what that committee has been mandated to do. But it does mean that mana whenua engagement will need to take a different avenue. And so, yeah, all I can say is there was a very comprehensive response provided through our operational arm on matters that prohibited us from being able to work in a manner that was appropriate and respected the mana of our iwi. And at a governance level, we've had a number of briefings that have included mana whenua of the region, not just the district, where we've raised concerns. And one of the untenable positions we find ourselves in is the insistence of recognising an iwi that does not have mana whenua status. That is probably the particular issue that we've identified, is the insistence of recognising the authority of an iwi that we do not recognise as mana whenua. And I'm happy to have a fuller discussion with you about that.
Thank you.
Item 18, Arts and Heritage Strategy.
Kia ora. I just want to talk to this one, because for this one, this one creates an opportunity for me. in terms of developing our Kāpiti history and our story. And I'm not too sure of the scope of the Arts and Heritage Strategy. But when we think about, I think it was point 8, we were talking about those the Wāhi Tapu areas. When we think about signage that we have all over Kāpiti, our destination plan, tourism, our visioning, basically a heritage strategy or some kind of strategy feeds into all that. So an opportunity for mana whenua to come together to actually draft or iterate that strategy in a comprehensive document would be so helpful in terms of feeding into all these different work streams, because then we would have that, well, it probably would be a live document, but, you know, just gathering that information and we you know, look at all the stuff that we gathered when we had the Te Urihi discussions, all that stuff that we had and is now sitting there, to bring that together in a cohesive strategy would be a fantastic idea. And then when you have smaller arts and heritage strategies, it's all there, and so you can tap into it quite easily. So that was when I saw that, I thought, well, the broader scope would be for us to actually tell that story, and then from that story springboards the timeline and the other stories that layer on top of it. But that is the founding story, in my humble opinion. That's the founding story because it's the starting story. So that to me raises an opportunity. Whether we can do that through the Arts and Heritage Strategy, whether we need another work stream to do that, but it's a real opportunity for us to really combine our historical kōrero and come up with something brilliant for the whole of Kāpiti. That was my comment.
We don't have our arts team here, but I think I can say that the scope is as wide as we want it to be. It's part of what we're engaging on is the scope. So yeah, get hold of the Rosie or Ian who are running the process, Rosie Sellers or Ian Littleworth, and just book a time and have a coffee and share your thoughts.
Just to add on to that, I'm meeting with Mike this afternoon around this kaupapa, and I'll be able to feed back to the art forum as well on what comes out of that. Ka pai? Is that okay?
I'm pleased to hear that because, look, it states quite clearly that the strategy development leads and contractors are wanting to engage with us. So I think it's helpful just to hear verbally today who they are. This paper doesn't tell us who they are. So could we inform ourselves by identifying who's who in the Z? And ultimately, we need to activate a response to their request to seek direct engagement. We haven't done that. Let's add that to the list of mahi to undertake. And let's at least at this point consider how we might initiate that initial contact with those individuals that have requested that engagement with us. Huri wai, kōrero mai.
Kia ora, sorry. I just trying to get myself up to speed on this particular item. What is the timeframes that the leads are working to? Because I totally support what Kim was saying around using this as an opportunity to really kind of sell what I think should be one of our priorities, which is telling our unique mana whenua story and history here. But I sort of kind of want to know, like, is this something that's like, you know, going to take a few months, or is this something that they need a response back by like next week or something?
I'll be confirming that with Mike i te rangi nei, huri wai, because yeah, there's been a few dates that have been discussed, so I'm just getting some clarity and I'll feed it back through the art forum.
Thank you.
Item 19, speed management plan. You can see there's another short story being composed here, so it suggests to me that there's mahi that needs to complement the words on the paper. and this is what I think has initiated the response from our Art Confederation regarding us really seriously looking at drilling down on a half day or a day to actually traverse the rohe. So we can actually all visualize those things that we are referring to across a number of those items that are included on this schedule. I see here again we have council officers. Perhaps if we could identify those responsible or those that would lead that engagement. Certainly they need to know who the mana whenua representatives are that are responsible for representing the interests of the three iwi. So yeah, perhaps we can expand on that a little bit more than simply putting in council officers. That doesn't say a lot to me, respectfully.
Just adding to that, we Ngā Hapu have fed through through the briefings and other forums. So they have since this paper, we have had contact with some staff and fed in some things. But if we look through the plan, we have had a little review of the plan. I believe they've contacted our chair and there was a meeting to progress. But when we looked at the speed plan overall, some of the things we highlighted early had been included in there, so that's good to see.
And what we did do is we gave ourselves a date. So if you have a look in here, you'll see that it's recorded that the Transport Safety Team will make contact and would attend a scheduled meeting in September. So we know the next meeting is on the 12th, but this perhaps will help us activate some sort of initial engagement perhaps before the 12th of September when we are planning to meet again. I'd like to encourage that. Have I? That was not on there. Steffi, we've got just talking to Steffi, we want to just add a couple of items. One is in response to a paper that we reflected upon, and I say we as Tatiawa, and this was conveyed to council on the 19th of the 7th, and it was about mana whenua remuneration, and particularly the policy. And the matter that we wanted to raise was, and this is again through our operational arm and governance, was regarding non-elected members' fee framework determining te Whakaminenga o Kāpiti daily fee and meeting fee. What we did do is we submitted a comparable fee schedule of our PO in the paper that we briefed on and we reviewed. It outlined the fee payment schedule, and so I've taken the liberty of identifying this and asking if we could add this to our Ngātaki Tarewa. It's not something that we can progress today, but Ngāti Tō Ngā Hapu are aware of the response that we provided to council on the 19th, and we'd like to generate further conversation regarding the current policy that council is using, or the framework that they're using to determine the fee and meeting fee for Te Whakaminenga or Kāpiti. It may mean having to generate more information around that, so we can give that further consideration. I just want to respectfully bring that to your attention today through Te Whakaminenga. Yeah. Okay. So any comments or questions on that? Kapoi. So that would be added in as item 20. And again, this is just wanting to capture a response again provided by Te Awa ki Whakarongotai, and it was caucused by the three iwi in terms of the long-term plan and unspent budget, and we directed that to our CE, to Darren, who provided a response to us regarding that, which was helpful. And really the context of our inquiry was just really to ask the question in terms of both CapEx and OpEx for 2022-2023, is it normal for that to be carried over? And there has been a reply, a response to that, explaining to us through Darren how council manages that. So again, I think it'll be good to ensure that this is captured from our three iwi perspective. We've engaged, we've had a response, and we acknowledge that response. We have included Hara in the conversation around this retrospectively on Friday, Darren. So Hara's aware of us having raised those questions and the response that we had from you. And then that's 21. And then 22 would be where we've separated out the claim stuff. Now, it's not just relative to the Ngāti Raukua phase of the Y2200 inquiry. I think it's fair to say that that should be the reference point for all claims-related mahi. So the takutai mona stuff at the present moment that's sitting across the Confederation is their foreshore and seabed stuff. It's the stuff that's fallen out of the Ngāti Awa, Te Awa Waitangi Tribunal report, where we're active at the present moment in the High Court regarding kārewa. So I think it can and should include all matters that are relative to Crown engagement in those sorts of areas, not just limited to the current Ngāti Raukua phase of this inquiry. And so we wanted to identify that as item 22. Yeah. All right. Are there any other?
Sorry, did you have a response to separating out the Wainui Whenua project from the Budge property?
Yeah. Can I just seek some clarity on that question which the Mayor raised earlier? My personal view is that it should all sit in context of each other. I don't see the matter concerning the Budge House being separate to the overall conversation about Wainui Whenua, but I'm happy to seek a response from Ngāti Toa and Ngā Hapu.
In that case, I would be more inclined to identify the item as Wainui Whenua and make Budge House a part of that, because the Wainui Whenua is a much larger project than the moving of the Budge House. So, yeah, I just think calling it the Budge property is not identifying the scale and scope of that piece of work.
Yes, and that's why when we first engaged with Carl, I asked him the question, are we talking about Wainui Whenua? And his initial response, oh no, because it was about the house. Well, actually, it's about that whole land interest, eh? Yeah. So I agree. If we're going to reference it, I think it should, sit comfortably with the whole discussion regarding Wainui Whenua.
We could just call it Wainui Whenua, including Budge property. I just think it more accurately describes it.
I'm fine with the name. And just in terms of, because the winery, like you say, is quite a big project. In terms of how we operationalise that, I would hate, because there's parts of the budge house that could progress. With just that, one or two things that can't progress, because I'd hate to see the budge house, which is a smaller project, be stored, waiting on the big winery whenua conversation. Bearing in mind that they are linked, and now there's a certain stage we can go to, and then that kicks into the bigger discussion. So happy with that, if that's the intent.
I think I just want to signal this is us reporting to ourselves. If we want to establish a line of communication or a reporting process that informs us on the whole take, then I think that feels comfortable, it feels appropriate. This is not at all to satisfy anyone else's interest but our own as mana whenua. There is one other matter that I will seek direction from the meeting to identify, and this is again in relation to a response we provided, Tatiawa provided, regarding the cycleways, walkways, bridleways advisory group. And what we noted is in our response to council on the 19th of the 7th is there's no option for mana whenua representatives to be a chairperson. And it's just us wanting to note that. And there doesn't appear to be any jurisdiction as to why the chairperson can only be a community representative. So again, I want to bring that back through this forum to report to ourselves on an observation that we've made. And again, there hasn't been any response to that written observation that has been notified to council. And we've just simply outlined how we have considered the terms of reference. Mana whenua representatives are not included in the quorum. This is disappointing for us in terms of our partnership with council. And again, just wanting to affirm our response to that particular item that was notified to us.
Thank you. So first of all, apologies that you weren't provided with an update on what happened as a result of the feedback that you gave before the meeting. But for that item on the cycleways, walkways and bridleways, we did amend the motion so that the iwi it was clear that the iwi representatives was included in the pool of people that, I mean, it was always the intention, I think, but it wasn't clear. So we made sure that was made clear and taken on board the responsibility as chair of that meeting to feedback on outcomes of the recommendations and the advice given by iwi partners.
Tēnā koe, Janet. That's helpful. Look, and I think for me, probably the last point for consideration is how do we respectfully generate that response, generate that information to ensure that the Art Confederation are up to play. It's helpful to know today that was respectfully considered, but I'm asking, and I've had this discussion this morning, how can we create real efficiency so what the Mayor has just conveyed through this meeting is brought to our attention as soon as possible. And that's not being critical, it's just saying, look, we are all wanting to try and create efficiency. We're wanting to ensure that in real time we're up to the play, and it's a reciprocal process. It's a reciprocal process whereby if we have caucused and had a talk about something we've reached a position on something, it's ensuring that we have, an efficient communication line directly back to council so that, in real time, we're keeping each other well informed. So I respectfully acknowledge that has been considered favourably for us, Janet, but it does give us an example of the need to actually stimulate lines of communication that will provide, advice and responses in a timely manner in advance of us coming back together and meeting. I know that there's lots of communication that occurs, but yeah, I think it highlights the fact that we'd like to work together to streamline the sharing of information, outcomes that are reached that don't need to be notified to us at the next meeting. That in between times, our ngātake tarewa can and should be updated, that there should be lines of communication that we establish. If there has been an outcome from a meeting of council or committee of council that would provide immediate clarity to matters that we have identified on our work program. So thank you.
Yeah,
Gemma?
just to add to that, I think I totally with that because as we are now, we're very lucky that the people that sit at this table also sit at the council table and the committees. Going forward, that's not always going to happen. The reliance shouldn't be on those in those positions to automatically assume that they've then updated. So I think it's critical that we have that clear. We're just a bit short on the ground at the moment.
Yeah, and I think from mine, because when we discussed that particular item, Mayor Holbrook, I said I honestly couldn't remember where exactly we landed in that council meeting in relation to that particular item. So, yeah, but I said, oh, it might be something to raise just because I didn't have an exact memory of where we landed in terms of that minute.
I've been asked if we want to just have a quick break or whether you would like to continue.
There's an update, so this will take.
Yes, we've
We're here, but this is going to take a little bit longer.
So we have got a couple of take that will take a little bit longer. So if we want a comfort stop, we're happy to have a comfort stop, or we can just simply go hard out and continue. In your hands for your advice and your direction. Yep. Haere tonu? Okay. Oh, me haere tonu. Well, thank you. I think that concludes a fairly significant component of our hui to review and update our ngātake tarewa. So thank you everyone for your helpful input. Iwi updates, are there any significant, important iwi updates that we should note and record?
I'm not sure that this is significant, but it's more of a thank you to both our central government agencies, KCDC and GWRC. The relationship that we've had and through the capacity funding agreements has allowed us to get some really substantial things happening on the ground. And just so noteworthy is being at the health camp, developing like a training and employment strategy and a training and employment hub, which is, really exciting and making some good connections. Just recently, our social services, which in a small matter of time have managed to stand up some awesome programs, and now looking at developing that strategy and just the capacity on the ground to engage in the learning that's occurred, as the importance to actually sitting at this table and how it all works. Probably wouldn't have been made possible without the work of others for us and the cooperation of the council. So from us, it's just a thank you around that, and long may that continue.
Tēnā koe, Kim. Huriwai, any updates from Ngāti Toa?
Nothing much at my end. So the only one being that across the many appointments that Ngāti Toa make in various councils and district councils, we are looking at kind of centralizing that communication point, just so that for any of ones like myself, because I don't actually work at the Rūnanga, I'm not actually across the day-to-day activities there. So just at the moment Ngāti Toa as the Rūnanga just trying to centralize their communication points so that it's easier when handling, engagement between people like myself who are appointed to certain roles and others who are representing Ngāti Toa's interests in various other matters. I did want to, just going off what Kim doing here, thank you for the thing. I did want to thank the team in particular who are looking at the Budge House work. I think in particular Chris, and how I think having her there, being able to keep the Jedabasi and when they were there doc to account has actually been quite useful, and I think it's given the whānau comfort, although it's going at a fast pace for them, we're just noting that, but I think it has given them comfort that they have been seen and heard, and that council are responsive, and coming through places like Te Whakaminenga has also been a way for them where they feel as if long-standing issues can be worked through. They may be resolved, they may not be, but I think just being a place where something can be raised has been very useful. So thank you.
Tēnā koe, Huriwai. Well, certainly would want to echo those sentiments, but in terms of an update regarding Ata Yawa ki whakarongotai, I will take this opportunity formally through Te Whakaminenga o Kāpiti of acknowledging the appointment of Frank Hippolyte to the position of CE. He's been very patient and respectful, and I will invite him to perhaps just provide a response or a comment to this hui. A couple of things for Tatiawa. On Sunday we had a fairly big hui, again to progress the takutai mōna application for Tatiawa ki whakarongotai. We are obviously also heavily responsible for the relationship that we have with our 2 DHBs, council, to continue providing the community service through Manaaki Kāpiti. You will be aware that there have been a number of roles disestablished with Whatuora. There have been changes that have been signalled. There are, funding streams that we're reliant on, that we're needing to navigate with our partners to ensure that we are able to continue delivering our services through Manaaki Kāpiti. It's fair to say that with the coming elections, and with us having to be fully aware of the political conversations going on right now, it does create a degree of uncertainty about what does that health sector look like in the future. We are obviously in a period of implementation for Frank's role with our iwi, and I do appreciate that he's will have many expectations placed on his shoulders. He's quietly just moving through what I would call an induction period to get to fully appreciate where Tatiawa ki Whakarongotai is active across the rohe. And that's probably about all I have to provide at this point as an update. But e hoa tu te toko ki a koe, Frank. Tēnā koe.
Kia ora koutou, he mihi kawana ki a koutou katoa, koutou mai ngā māngai o ngā iwi. He hōna re tēnei te tū I roto I toku tūranga hau. Hei māngai mō Te Atiawa ki Whakarongotai. E pāna ki ngā mahi maha. It's a privilege to be appointed to be the tumu whakarai of Te Atiawa ki Whakarongotai. I've been sitting through the hui today and have been counting myself lucky to be in such an organisation and to be associated with such a council. I have had experience in other areas and have dealt with 3 councils. And one of your previous CEOs left this area and came down to Te Tauihu, and I worked with him as well. It's a pleasure to be able to work with a supportive council who acknowledges mana whenua and te treaty o Waitangi, and to whakamana the iwi with which you work with. So I'm looking forward to working with all of you, Darren and Hara. Looking forward to connecting strongly and to streamline our lines of communication. And e mihi kawana ki toku whanaunga huriwai. Tēnā koe. So happy to be here and looking forward to working with you in the future.
Item 9, Treaty of Settlements, overview from each iwi. I think we've captured that. Unless there's anything else that you feel we need to add.
Could I just comment on that agenda item? So we now have treaty settlements in our matters under action. And the same chief executive has just been mentioned, I think, introduced that onto the agenda about 12 years ago, and it was kind of pre-application or pre-process, just to see where we were at in terms of gearing up to commence that process. So I don't know that it's a necessary agenda item for this committee anymore, but now that their matters now that they're in action, so to speak. So over to the group, but just thought I'd give a little bit of an explanation as to why that thing's in 2 places, maybe.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's a very good point that you raise, and I would ask that we refer this back to Ngā Hapu Ngāti Tō Tatiawa to consider whether they want this to be visible on the agenda. It may mean just having a little bit more of a think about why that is set there. And I immediately feel like I need to go and have a talk to Ruben. Maybe that was just a very succinct way of sending a message to council by having it sitting there. And I don't want to be dismissive at all of what you said, Janet. But yeah, I'm just happy at the end of the day that the Whakaminenga or Kāpiti realises the importance and the significance of having Te Tiriti, as part of our discussions. It's absolutely essential that happens. Okay, item 9.
Andre, can I
just say something on that? Yeah. Just on that, I think that's exactly what you should do, so I totally call that. But from our perspective and watching the girls, namely Hara and Deanna, work over the last week to get some of the stuff to the table, and knowing the journey that we have, I think just even council and council staff knowing the timetable is helpful so that we can try and work around those time pressures, because the fact that it started means that it's even more work and more important right now. So even if at a minimum we could just be mindful of the timetables and the time pressures that we will be under going through that process is helpful.
Item 10, the Newhanga Kāpiti Community Centre. Tēnā koutou. Is it Dave? Is he? Thank you, Dave, and thank you, Janice.
Through you, Mr. Chair, morena koutou. Today, I start by offering the apologies of Morag Taimaliatani, who was supposed to be working with Dave to talk to you about the community centre today, but is unfortunately at home with a unwell child. So I will do my best to support Dave somewhat in the fashion that Morag might have. But we bring this update today, I guess, for several reasons. Firstly, Te Newhanga Kāpiti Community Centre is a significant council facility, and via the project management office, which Dave leads, there is now work underway on that project, which will become visible through other council channels, and we wanted to make sure that for your committee, given that you walk past Te Newhanga every time you come here, and given, more importantly, that it is a site and a facility with a connection to mana whenua, we wanted to make sure that we also gave you the opportunity to have an update on where it's at. We are, however, very conscious of the time, and that we are probably the people that stand between you and Kai. So I think Dave might move through this fairly quickly, but please do let him know if there's anywhere you want to stop and ask some questions. I think the other point that I would note is that we have independently of this Hui reached out to Te Atiawa to seek advice and guidance on what involvement Te Atiawa would like to have as part of this project. So with that, I will hand over to Dave to tell you all the exciting stuff.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, if I'm going too fast, please do let me know, and I'll slow down. So today we just want to give you a brief background on the community centre, update what work's been carried out since it closed, and outline the next steps for this project. So just as a bit of a background, the community centre was built by the community through fundraising. It was taken over by council in 2018 and closed in 2021 due to weather tightness. We've got a little video, if it plays, just to show you what the community centre is like in action on one of our community days.
Today we're running our community day, and we just brought a whole heap of community groups and just getting the community together.
Cool. Okay. Strategic alignment, just a brief reflection that we have aligned this project with the Council's top 10 priorities. So our current goal at the moment is to really fill the gaps in our knowledge between, so we can enable elected members to make an informed decision in the upcoming LTP. And just acknowledge that this project is connected to a number of other work streams, specifically around the town centre revisioning and what we're doing with Waikanai Library and the hub that we can have creating up there. So since 2021, when the building closed, we have been doing research into what happened and why it closed, and what the purpose of that building was for. And then obviously we had COVID come and hit, which delayed the project a little bit more. We've been exploring the opportunities with the Newhanga Trust. We've undertaken a building condition assessment, and pretty much we've got options to replace or to fix up the building, but what we'll probably be left with is about 50% of the existing framing. Everything else really will be replaced. The roof, it needs extending eaves, just things like that, all the windows and doors, and also because of how it sits, if you look in the top left-hand photo, it's quite low to the ground, so we need a 250mm nib, concrete nib, pouring around the building, lifting it up and doing that, putting that in to make it weathertight. Yeah, as I said, since mid-2021, there's been obviously COVID, the increased focus on climate change and sustainability, cost of living increases, pressure on council budgets. So yeah, we've been working on that. There's also been a sector-wide shift from a fixed function community centre to a multi-function hubs. And also iwi organisations taking a stronger role in helping us deliver those services. We also have a new neighbour in the Wellington group, which have bought the land just between the expressway and here, and have got a big development going on, so that's obviously going to affect what we do. Gaps in our understanding. We would like to know more about the aspirations of our partners and what opportunities they might bring, as well as what the current and future needs of the building would be, and that's something that we're focusing on now. Also, just understanding what we can achieve with the budget that we have at hand, and what other options there might be available, and also ensuring that not just capital expenditure, but certainly operational expenditure. How can we make it work from an operating model? So we've identified 4 options for the building to do it up. So they range from remediation using the same footprint, and internal layout of $3.4 million estimate, through to a full replacement, which is about 18. Yep. Upgrades in progress. So we are leading the project. The project management office is leading the project. We've set up a project governance board and project control group as well, to help manage the project. We've reached out to our iwi partners, and I think we're waiting to hear back, just a little push. we've also got a request for proposal live on GETS to undertake a needs assessment. So this is to work out what the needs are for the building. So it's not to do with the building. We put the building aside and we're looking at what are our social and community needs so we can work out how best to meet those. So that's underway now. And we hope to have that work begin on the actual assessment in September with a 3-month time frame for completion. So we'll hopefully coming back to council in December is the plan at the moment. And just we've identified what synergies we have with the other work streams. Also, we're developing potential designs of a meanwhile space to go down beside in the area around the building, so we can sort of give people some ideas, and also sort of start bringing people back into the fold and that. And we're also going to do some more work on the structural assessment of the building and our options. And next steps, we're looking to start communicating with the community. We've got our needs assessment underway. We're going to have a workshop with the social sector, get them, start talking to them, trying to understand what their needs and requirements are. Yeah, and generally probably just tidy up the building. So I think that's important, even though it's derelict, that we actually show that we do care about it. Any questions?
Could I add a couple of things?
Yes,
before we
you
go
may.
to questions?
Sorry.
Is that all right?
Yeah, sure.
I appreciate that was the whistle stop tour, and I guess I want to make sure that we're really clearly acknowledging that this is a significant project for the community in Parapara Umu, and we really are very keen to understand the aspirations, not just of Te Atiawa ki Whakarongotai actually, but if our other mana whenua partners have an interest within this facility, then we are very happy to be having some conversations about that. Although it is based in Parapara Umu, I know that the previous services and programs that were delivered out of that centre before it had to close did reach far and wide across the district. From a project perspective, when we are thinking about the catchment area for this facility, we do think, beyond the bounds of Parapara Umu. We do look further south. For example, to Pakakiriki, where potentially through this facility, there may be an opportunity to deliver programs and services that would be of benefit to that community, but cannot be delivered within that community for a range of reasons. The same is true of Raumati. The presentation acknowledged the linkages to other projects that are happening within the town centre. That also includes other pieces of work that are sort of at an investigation stage, I guess, around an education hub, around an indoor sports facility. And the presentation also acknowledged the connection to the Waikanai Library and Service Centre, well, what was the Waikanai Library and Service Centre project, but could potentially be a community hub of the fashion in part as well. So in that sense, this is quite a key project because of its interrelationships and connections to other council mahi. And yeah, we're very happy to answer any questions and to explore anything offline that's of interest to you with this project.
Any pātai? Any questions? Any comments? First of all, thank you, Dave, and thank you, Janice, for the presentation and the update. I was watching the mighty Silver Ferns in Cape Town playing. A number of people were swinging the poi, and one of the commentators made the observation that they should not be saying pois. They should be poi. there was a word in there, there was a kupu in that presentation that had that S on the end. Just ask if we can remove that because that's not correct. That's not at all being critical of the excellent work that's been undertaken. It's just ensuring that if we're going to use our kupu, that we use it appropriately and correctly. Just reflecting on that awesome win of the Silver Ferns. Tatiawa will respond, so thank you for providing that reminder. Nahina Trust. When I acknowledged our kui this morning, Puiria, Love, it's her daughter, Tākiri, that sits on that trust. And when you mention Nahina, it makes me think about Ihaka Te Ngarara, our tupuna rangatira that was identified and has been referenced in our Waitangi claim phase of the inquiry, and also then respectfully refers to Ngāti Puketapu. I think, Dave, there's going to be a conversation that we will respectfully have internally with Nahina Trust, with those uri mokopuna that you referred to of Ihaka Te Ngarara, of Ngāti Puketapu, before Tatiawa provides a response. And obviously there'll be some familiarity of a section of that hapu who have been very active in our phase of the Waitangi Tribunal inquiry. More importantly, what I'm respectful of is Nahina Trust signalling through their Ngāti Puketapu connections, their aspirations, which includes the establishment of a marae right here. So I just want to acknowledge again that kui who's passed. I want to acknowledge those of our iwi who are actively responsible on the Nahina Trust, of those lines and links of whakapapa to our rangatira, to our tupuna. And yes, we will engage with our whanaunga and provide a response. So thank you. It's a helpful reminder. I'm also just noting timeframes, so it's helpful to know that there are timeframes that place expectations on our staff to report back to us. And so I've noted those, and I guess the detail around what's been presented today can be captured as part of today's and perhaps looking at, is there again something we extract from our kōrero today that provides an action for the three iwi. But that's my response. I thank you for bringing us up to speed. I have personal experience of that really important, complex, servicing the community of the district in a professional capacity. So it's just good to get an update on where things are. So thank you. Are there any other questions or any other comments or responses?
Just that ngā hapu position would likely be to support and tautoko Te Atiawa. Obviously, any support that we can give, we will, but we would normally get them to take the lead on that.
Any response or
Huriwai.
comment from you, Huriwai?
Oh no, I was just going to put it down. No, just because Kim basically said what I was going to put up, which is just reiterating that we'll take the lead from Te Atiawa. I did want to sort of note though that, you know, depending on which outcomes and objectives you're trying to reach, there's obviously this particular site has, I think, a great many touch points for opportunities. I think, and just for myself, I was wondering, in terms of the rangatahi group that are being involved with KCDC, how much they would be sort of tied into it. I was just thinking of my own self when I was growing up in Kawerau. There was a youth facility that sort of just came in quite late, but I think particularly in an environment where, you know, some people may have families that are in a, you know, unstable environment or whatnot, having a space away where they can, you know, be kids, or where kuia and kaumātua can sort of reconnect at a social level, I think is quite important to the mental and social health and well-being outcomes that we'd want to seek as KCDC and as mana whenua in this rohe. So no, looking forward to seeing what comes out of that.
Tēnā koe huri wai. Appreciate your kōrero. Anything else? Ko pau ngā kōrero? Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Janice. Item 11 is correspondence. It's noted on our sheet here that there is no correspondence that has been received. You would think someone would write to us, seeing as Matariki. Are there any future agenda requests or items that we should note in advance of our next hui on the 12th of September? Thank you. No other items? We've probably got enough, eh? If we were sensible, we'd move on to item 12, item 13. Are there any other matters that the meeting would like to raise or to note before we close? Just around the tepu, anything else? Huriwai, anything from you? Ko pau ngā kōrero? Darren, anything from you? That will conclude our hui. Appreciate everybody's input. I think we've done pretty well. I think we're right on the button. 5 seconds to go. So it's very well done. So yeah, congratulations, well done. Thank you for the input. Looking forward to seeing our updated Ngā Take Tarewa and the actions that have been concluded from today's hui. Thank you for your valuable time. Nā reira, me tuku taku inoi ki te atua, te kaihango ngā me katoa, nāna e whakaarihi ia te kaupapa nui o te rangi nei. Nā reira, tuku taku mihi ki āia. E whakamau ana mātou ki ngā me pai ki ngā me tika koe ne te tumanako me te whakapono e rungu i te ingoa tau tamata kai whakaora me te wairua tapu. A tuturu kia rongo whakamau a kia tēnā. Huye. Kia ora mai tātou. I think we're allowed to have a cup of tea now.